beyond the Pillars of Hercules, today known as the Strait of Gibraltar, home to a rich and powerful civilization that surpassed all others. Atlantis was said to possess a mighty naval fleet, magnificent palaces, intricate canals, and technological marvels that astonished the ancient world. But out of greed and arrogance, the Atlanteans dared to challenge the gods, and in a single fateful night, violent earthquakes and tsunamis dragged the entire continent beneath the sea. So, why would such a story be banned? To answer this, we must understand the context of medieval Europe. While Plato himself used Atlantis as a philosophical illustration of societal decline, later scholars began to wonder, what if it wasn't just a metaphor? What if Atlantis had truly existed as a prehistoric civilization more advanced than even Greece or Rome? That possibility made any writing on Atlantis highly sensitive. In an era when the Catholic Church controlled intellectual thought, the idea of a civilization predating the biblical timeline was unacceptable. According to the doctrine of creation, human history spanned only a few thousand years, beginning with Adam and Eve, a mighty empire existing 9,000 years before Plato shattered that framework, posing a dangerous threat to religious teachings. And so, from the 12th century onward, translations and commentaries on Timaeus and Critias that mentioned Atlantis were strictly censored. In Italy and Spain, several publishers who printed works about Atlantis were suppressed by church authorities. Certain manuscripts in the Vatican Library contain clear notes, De Atlantis non licet disserere. It is not permitted to discuss Atlantis. During the Renaissance, as new ideas began to stir, secret maps once again sparked interest in the lost continent. The famed cartographer Gerhard Mercator included cryptic notes on his maps of Europe referring to a lost land in the Atlantic. Abraham Ortelius, the father of modern cartography, wrote similar annotations about vanished continents he believed once existed. But perhaps the most shocking evidence came from a different source, the Piri-Reis map of 1513. This Ottoman map, drawn on gazelle skin, depicted the coastline of South America, and even southern regions that Europeans had not yet explored. Astonishingly, the portion of Antarctica shown on the Piri-Reis map displays an ice-free coastline, a condition that would only have existed thousands of years ago during a warm period. Some alternative scholars argue that this map was based on sources far older, possibly even from the time of Atlantis. Adding to the mystery, many folk legends from the Azores, the Canary Islands, and even the Americas speak of a great land that once sank beneath the sea. In the Bahamas, local traditions still tell of the Beach of the Gods, where ancient ruins sometimes emerge when the tides recede. And here is the question: why does a legend like Atlantis endure with such strength, spreading across so many cultures that had no direct contact with Greek thought? Could it be that the memory of a lost civilization is somehow preserved within the collective subconscious of humanity? Today, archaeologists continue to discover curious structures on the Atlantic seafloor, from the Bimini Road to regions off the coast of Spain, lending further intrigue to the Atlantis hypothesis. Mainstream science remains skeptical, yet these findings are enough to provoke new questions. Were the forbidden books of the past hiding truths that we are not yet ready to confront? And if the existence of Atlantis was so carefully suppressed, how many other civilizations have been erased from official history simply because their reality threatened established worldviews? The answer may lead us down paths more surprising than we can imagine in the journey yet to come. But if Atlantis has become a global symbol, from philosophy to pop culture, then Lemuria remains a story far fewer people know. Its name is often whispered only within small academic circles or in obscure manuscripts few have ever touched. And perhaps for that very reason, the details of Lemuria are even more easily forgotten, or worse, deliberately erased from the official flow of history. What's fascinating is that the concept of Lemuria didn't begin as a myth, but as a question of biology. In the mid-19th century, naturalists faced a strange paradox. Lemurs, a species native to Madagascar, had fossil relatives found in both Africa and India, yet were completely absent from the regions in between, such as East Africa. To explain this, British zoologist Philip Sclater proposed a bold hypothesis in an 1864 article in the Quarterly Journal of Science, that a vast landmass, which he called Lemuria, had once connected Madagascar and India across the Indian Ocean, providing a bridge for these species before the continent sank beneath the sea. Though initially a geological theory, later dismissed by the modern theory of plate tectonics, the name Lemuria soon caught the imagination of the occult world. By the late 19th century, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, drew inspiration from it to craft a much broader doctrine. She claimed that Lemuria was not merely an ancient continent, but had been home to an extraordinarily advanced prehistoric civilization dating back more than 50,000 years, long before accepted civilizations like Sumer or ancient Egypt. According to Blavatsky, the Lemurians were a race of giants with highly developed spiritual powers, possessing knowledge of energy, architecture, and the cosmos far beyond modern understanding. She cited Eastern manuscripts, particularly from Tibetan monasteries, as her sources. This made her writings, especially The Secret Doctrine, 1888, a prime target for censorship campaigns. In late 19th century Europe, as the occult movement surged, many conservative Christian nations such as France, Spain, and Portugal placed Blavatsky's works on banned book lists. The reason wasn't just the mystical content, but the fact that her doctrines indirectly challenged the biblical model of creation by referencing pre-Adamite races and civilizations, those that supposedly existed before Adam in the Bible. Notably, many ancient Eastern manuscripts that Blavatsky cited also contain echoes of a lost land. In South India, ancient Tamil texts speak of Kumari Kandam, a vast continent once linking southern India with Madagascar and Australia, now swallowed by the sea. Tamil epics such as Silapatikaram and Manimekalai tell of ancient kingdoms lost beneath the waves, along with faded memories of sophisticated sciences. Some modern scholars suggest that Kumari Kandam and Lemuria may simply be two names for the same myth, or perhaps two cultural reflections of an actual historical reality long distorted by time. This possibility grew more intriguing in recent decades as surveys of the Indian Ocean seafloor revealed unexpected geological formations. In 2013, a team of Indian geologists discovered granite blocks deep beneath ocean sediments near the Seychelles, granite being a rock that forms on land, not on the ocean floor. This suggests that fragments of an ancient continental mass may indeed lie submerged there, remnants of a land torn apart by tectonic shifts. Off the coast of Tamil Nadu, near Mahabalipuram, divers have also discovered stone structures believed to be the ruins of ancient temples, submerged after a massive tsunami. Local legends have long told of the 7 pagodas, of which only one remains above water today, while the other 6 are said to have vanished beneath the sea. So, Could Lemuria truly have existed as a vast continent? And if so, just how advanced was its civilization that later powers might have deliberately tried to erase it from human memory? A provocative theory was proposed in the early 20th century by researcher William Scott Elliott. Drawing on Theosophical Society materials, he suggested that Lemuria had once been the birthplace of knowledge later partially inherited by ancient civilizations like Egypt and India. If such knowledge were ever fully acknowledged, it would force us to rewrite all of human history, recognizing that many achievements we credit to so-called enlightened civilizations like Greece and Rome may in fact be mere shadows of what came before. Perhaps for this very reason, deeper manuscripts about Lemuria were never widely circulated. In fact, within the Vatican's archives, according to researchers like Father Malachi Martin, who once had access, there are said to be translations of Eastern texts describing a continent of the gods. But these translations lie deep within restricted rooms of the archive, where very few are permitted to enter. Lemuria, like Atlantis, still lingers at the blurred edge of legend and history. But as more geological and archaeological evidence comes to light, perhaps one day this once banned name will be restored to the official pages of human history. And if Lemuria truly did exist, we must ask, how many other civilizations whose legacy once shaped this planet have been deliberately erased from our collective memory? The answer will continue to guide us on this journey into the deepest hidden secrets of history. After the waves of speculation about Atlantis and Lemuria had begun to settle, yet another name, even more obscure, with even fewer traces of evidence, emerged from the hidden corners of forbidden manuscripts: Mu. Not everyone has heard of this name, and fewer still dare to question its existence. For among all the lost civilizations, Mu is perhaps the one most aggressively denied, not only by mainstream academia, but also by the forces that control access to knowledge. The story of Mu begins in the late 19th century, when French explorer and researcher Auguste Le Plongeon, while studying ancient Mayan inscriptions in Yucatan, Mexico, claimed to have translated symbols that spoke of a lost continent called Mu. According to him, Mu had once stood at the heart of the Pacific Ocean, the cradle of a great civilization tens of thousands of years ago. Le Plongeon believed that the Maya were the descendants of refugees from Mu after the continent was destroyed by catastrophic geological upheavals. He published his findings in a series of articles and books, but instead of being welcomed, his work was mocked by European and American scholars, excluded from prestigious libraries, and in some cases even banned from university curricula. But the story did not end there. In the early 20th century, British Army officer and researcher James Churchward, while stationed in India, was granted access by a senior monk from a secret order to a set of ancient tablets, what he called the Knuckle tablets. According to Churchward, these tablets contained records from a super-advanced civilization that once flourished on the continent of Mu, a vast landmass in the middle of the Pacific, spanning millions of square kilometers, connecting Asia to the Americas through chains of islands. Churchward claimed that the civilization of Mu had reached heights of science, art, and spirituality unmatched by any that followed. The people of Mu, he said, understood the cosmic laws of energy, built massive structures without mechanical tools, and developed a universal language and body of knowledge, fragments of which were later inherited by ancient civilizations such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India. Churchward went on to publish a series of books about Mu, beginning with The Lost Continent of Mu in 1926. But in a familiar pattern seen with Atlantis and Lemuria, his work was swiftly attacked by the academic establishment. Scholarly bodies in both Britain and the US issued recommendations that Churchward's books be excluded from curricula and libraries. Some European publishers even refused to distribute his works after facing pressure from groups linked to the Church. The reasons were not purely scientific skepticism. A deeper concern lay beneath. If Mu had truly existed, then the entire narrative of human migration and the development of civilizations across Asia, the Americas, and Oceania would have to be rewritten. Trans-Pacific connections, long denied by traditional migration theories, would need to be acknowledged. This posed a threat to many long-held theories of social evolution and the political narratives attached to them. What made the story of Mu even more intriguing was the appearance of unexpected evidence. From the giant stone statues of Polynesia on Easter Island, which Churchward identified as remnants of Mu, to architectural and linguistic patterns showing startling similarities between cultures separated by thousands of kilometers across the Pacific. For example, researchers such as Thor Heyerdahl pointed out remarkable parallels in boat-building techniques and artistic traditions between Polynesians and South American cultures, similarities too specific to dismiss as coincidence. Moreover, linguistic studies have revealed surprising connections between the languages of Pacific Island groups and ancient tongues of Asia. One question often arises: how did the Polynesians, who lacked large ship technology, manage to migrate across such vast ocean distances between small Pacific islands? Could they have been the descendants of much older, more advanced seafaring civilizations? Further adding to the mystery, off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, divers have discovered massive stone structures beneath the sea, terraces, columns, and walls that appear to have been shaped by human hands. While mainstream archaeologists argue these may be natural formations, many independent researchers believe they are the remains of a prehistoric civilization, possibly linked to Mu. So why has Mu been so forcefully erased from historical discourse? One likely reason is that its existence undermines the narrative of Western-centric history, one that places Europe at the pinnacle of intellectual development. Acknowledging the possibility of a highly advanced prehistoric civilization in the Asia-Pacific would erode the primacy of Western historical claims. Yet despite the opposition, Mu continues to live on in the oral traditions of many Pacific peoples. The Hawaiians tell of Kanehunamoku, a land of the gods now swallowed by the sea. The Maoris speak of Hawaiki, an ancient homeland their ancestors left in search of new lands. Whether these are literal histories or symbolic echoes, they leave tantalizing traces of something that once was. Today, advances in oceanography, underwater archaeology, and studies of prehistoric sea level changes continue to yield new clues. With every ancient structure discovered beneath the waves, the question of Mu rises once more. Perhaps Mu is nothing more than an illusion, but perhaps it is the missing piece in humanity's story, one that certain powers have fought to conceal for over a century. And if Mu did indeed exist, then we have only begun to scratch the surface of an ancient global network of civilizations, one that, when fully revealed, could forever change how we understand ourselves. If Atlantis was a golden city buried beneath the Atlantic, and Lemuria and Mu were lost continents beneath vast oceans, then Hyperborea, the next mysterious name on our journey, is tied to the far north, a land where the sun never sets, and where ancient knowledge is said to still flow, quietly, through the hidden veins of history. For centuries, Hyperborea has existed at the blurred edge between myth and history, dismissed as fantasy by official accounts, yet strangely persistent across many cultures. What makes it even more remarkable is that this name did not appear in just one tradition, but echoed through multiple civilizations, from ancient Greece to Norse legends, and even within mystical manuscripts carefully hidden away for centuries. The origins of the name Hyperborea can be traced back to the writings of Herodotus, Pindar, and especially the poetry and epic tales of ancient Greece. According to these accounts, Hyperborea was a land far to the north, beyond the lands of the Scythians, where the Hyperboreans lived in eternal peace. There, the sun shone both day and night during the summer months. The land was lush. People lived long lives and knew neither war nor disease. At first, scholars viewed this as a symbol, an ideal land in the Greek imagination. But over time, as ancient maps were rediscovered, researchers noticed that many medieval and Renaissance cartographers had depicted Hyperborea as an actual geographic location. Gerardus Mercator's famous 1569 map clearly shows 4 islands surrounding a massive whirlpool at the North Pole, labeled as Terra Hyperborea. The story didn't stop there. In the 17th and 18th century Europe, theologians and mystics began to reference Hyperborea with deeper and more unsettling implications. In certain manuscripts listed among the Vatican's forbidden texts, Hyperborea was described as the cradle of a prehistoric civilization that once exerted vast influence across Eurasian cultures. According to these sources, the Hyperboreans possessed not only advanced knowledge of astronomy and geography, but also an understanding of spiritual energies and cosmic laws that we are only beginning to grasp today. One of the most controversial works on the subject is Arctos, the Polar Myth, by Jocelyn Godwin. Drawing from ancient documents, Godwin argued that belief in a Hyperborean civilization once spread widely through Europe's secret societies, from the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons and other esoteric movements. For this reason, books discussing Hyperborea were once tightly censored within European libraries. What makes political and academic circles uneasy about Hyperborea is not simply its mystical nature. The problem lies deeper. If a civilization once thrived in the far north, one highly advanced in prehistoric times, then the linear model of human progress, rising solely from southern cultures, begins to fall apart. Hyperborea suggests that a parallel branch of human development, perhaps even more advanced, may once have existed and been forgotten. Another factor adding to the sensitivity is Hyperborea's entanglement with dangerous racial and ideological theories in the 20th century. Unorthodox scholars such as Guido von List and certain German mystical groups once claimed Hyperborea as the original homeland of the Aryan race, a claim that later fueled highly politicized extremist ideologies. After World War II, many studies on Hyperborea were either banned or classified as sensitive, not purely for academic reasons, but because of their potential to incite extremism. Yet if we strip away these ideological layers, the traces of Hyperborea remain deeply compelling. Norse mythology, from the tales of Asgard to the wisdom of the Sami peoples of the Arctic, speaks of lands in the far north that were once centers of knowledge and power. In Norse legend, Asgard, home of the gods, is described as a polar realm, connected to the cosmos by the great tree Yggdrasil. Modern researchers have sought geographical evidence for Hyperborea. Studies of ancient Arctic sediments reveal that the polar regions once experienced far warmer climates during prehistoric periods, supporting forests and animal life unimaginable in today's frozen environment. This raises the question, was there once a time when the far north could have supported human life, and perhaps even a civilization? Further, archaeological discoveries in Russia's Kola Peninsula, where mysterious ancient stone structures aligned with astronomical patterns have been found, suggest that memories of Hyperborea may not be entirely fictional. Yet perhaps the deepest reason why Hyperborea was pushed out of official history lies elsewhere. It symbolizes a civilization not built upon material power or domination, but upon knowledge and harmony with nature. A social model that in the modern world is often seen as impractical and even dangerous because it challenges existing structures of authority. And so Hyperborea continues to flow quietly beneath the surface, through ancient manuscripts, secret societies, and whispered legends. Part of its truth may still be hidden. But the light of Hyperborea, a land where knowledge and spiritual wisdom reigned, quietly awaits the day it may once again be revealed. The story of lost civilizations is not confined to Greek legends or ancient European maps. In the East, too, faint memories endure of brilliant lands swallowed by the sea. One of the most mysterious of these is the legend of Kumari Kandam, a magnificent continent said to have once connected southern India with Madagascar, stretching all the way toward Australia. And like Atlantis, Lemuria, or Hyperborea, the name Kumari Kandam has long been dismissed as superstition, with many documents about it banned or censored for centuries. What makes Kumari Kandam particularly fascinating is that its story was not imagined by Western scholars. It comes directly from the epics, ancient manuscripts, and oral traditions of the Tamil people, one of the world's oldest and most continuous cultures. In Silappatikaram and Manimekalai, two famous Tamil epics dating back to the first millennium CE, detailed accounts describe a vast land to the south of India that now lies beneath the ocean. According to ancient Tamil texts, Kumari Kandam was once the heart of ancient Tamil civilization, a center of knowledge, art, language, and philosophy at its peak. Tamil tradition holds that 3 Tamil literary assemblies, known as Sangams, were once hosted in this land for thousands of years. According to legend, 2 of these 3 Sangams were lost when the sea rose and engulfed the land. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Tamil scholars such as U.V. Swaminatha Iyer and Maraimalai Adigal devoted years to reconstructing ancient texts that referenced Kumari Kandam. But during British colonial rule, references to Kumari Kandam were suppressed in academic circles because colonial authorities sought to discourage the idea that a great South Indian civilization might have once flourished, perhaps even predating the northern Aryan cultures. The notion of an ancient Tamil civilization with deep influence would have undermined colonial narratives designed to legitimize foreign rule. In the 20th century, as the Tamil cultural renaissance gained momentum, Tamil activists and intellectuals began to reclaim Kumari Kandam as an essential part of their identity. But they soon faced resistance, not only from Indian mainstream historians, but also from Western academics. Some scholarly papers on Kumari Kandam were rejected by international journals on the grounds that they lacked scientific basis, even as archaeological and geological evidence increasingly supported the possibility of such a land. One line of evidence comes from studies of ancient sea levels. Geologists surveying the continental shelf of Tamil Nadu have found traces of ancient river channels and submerged plains now lying beneath the sea. Bathymetric maps reveal land areas that once stood above water but now lie hundreds of meters beneath the ocean. A study by India's National Institute of Oceanography indicates that sea levels rose by about 100 meters after the last ice age, enough to submerge vast coastal regions. Further support comes from archaeological finds at Mahabalipuram, which align with ancient legends of sunken temples. According to local tradition, the ancient city of Mahabalipuram once boasted 7 magnificent temples, of which only one remains above ground today. In 2004, when the Indian Ocean tsunami struck, the receding waters temporarily revealed massive submerged stone structures, just as ancient stories had described. A subsequent survey by the Archaeological Survey of India confirmed the presence of man-made structures beneath the sea. In linguistic studies, scholars like Kamil Zvelebil have pointed out that Tamil contains many ancient maritime terms that may stem from a deeper seafaring culture we do not yet fully understand. Certain words related to navigation, fishing, and the sea have roots that suggest the Tamil people had a maritime tradition going back thousands of years, consistent with the idea of a prehistoric island civilization. What makes Kumari Kandam dangerous in the eyes of those who seek to control historical narratives is not simply the possibility that a lost land once existed, but the deeper implications. If ancient Tamil civilization had once centered in a great, advanced land, then the entire theory of Aryan invasion bringing civilization to India would need to be reconsidered. And this could fundamentally reshape how Indians view their own history, something neither colonial rulers nor conservative forces have wanted. To this day, mainstream academia remains cautious about Kumari Kandam. Even as archaeological and geological evidence grows, the term Kumari Kandam rarely appears in official scholarly works. Serious research papers on the topic often use more neutral phrases such as ancient Tamil maritime civilization to avoid being labeled unscientific. Yet in the collective memory of millions of Tamil people, Kumari Kandam remains vivid, not merely as a fading legend but as a vital part of cultural identity. And as the sea continues to reveal its secrets, perhaps one day the world will be forced to acknowledge that beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean once thrived a civilization that history has long sought to forget. If the stories of Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea, or Kumari Kandam still linger between the realms of legend and archaeology, then the story of Tartaria, or the Tartari Empire, presents a different and sharper challenge. This time the traces were not buried beneath the ocean. They once stood clearly marked on maps in European books and in the collective awareness of generations of Western scholars. Then suddenly, within less than 2 centuries, the name Tartaria vanished from world maps, from history textbooks, as if it had never existed. What truly happened? To understand the story, we must go back to the period from the 16th to the early 19th centuries. On many old European maps, especially those by Abraham Ortelius, Gerardus Mercator, Joan Bleu and others, the name Tartaria or Grand Tartary appears prominently, covering vast regions of northern and eastern Asia. From the Ural Mountains stretching across Siberia to the Pacific, including Manchuria, Mongolia, and even territories now part of Kazakhstan and much of Russia. In contemporary European geography books, Tartaria was described as a land of mystery, home to nomadic peoples, ancient cities, powerful rulers, and vast trade networks. Some maps even illustrated grand structures, from palaces to strange towers, across this vast land. Yet by the late 19th century, the term Tartaria had almost completely disappeared from official maps. The lands once grouped under this name were now subdivided under new geographic concepts: Siberia under Russian control, Manchuria under Chinese influence, Mongolia either independent or dominated, and Central Asia redefined by modern national borders. Simultaneously, European history and geography textbooks removed or minimized mentions of Tartaria, treating it as an outdated and inaccurate term. This sudden disappearance, like smoke vanishing from the canvas of history, has sparked many questions among independent researchers. If Tartaria had merely been a mistaken Western label for nomadic tribes, why was the name used so consistently for over 3 centuries? And if the region was truly just empty steppes, why do so many old documents and maps depict cities, trade routes, and even centers of learning? A key argument comes from the analysis of old maps. Researchers such as Anatoly Fomenko and many unorthodox historians point out that Mercator's 1595 map shows Tartaria with numerous clearly structured cities and symbols indicating a high level of development. Similarly, in early 17th century works by British geographer John Speed, Grand Tartary is depicted as an empire with complex political and social structures, not merely a land of wandering tribes. Moreover, many 18th century European engravings and illustrations depict architectural structures in Siberia and Central Asia with distinct styles, quite different from Russian or Chinese architecture of the time. Some ancient buildings still standing in Siberia, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan bear marks of advanced construction, beyond what nomadic communities would typically produce. Even more intriguing are references within secret European society documents, particularly in certain theosophical manuscripts and 19th century Russian mystical writings, describing Tartaria as an ancient civilization that once preserved advanced knowledge of energy, meteorology, and even construction technologies. Some legends suggest that the so-called lightning towers, large tower-like structures once seen in Russian cities, may be remnants of this civilization. But how could such a civilization be erased so completely from history? One compelling theory points to the role of the Russian Empire and its territorial expansion in the 18th and 19th centuries. As Russia conquered Siberia and Central Asia, consolidating those lands under Russian identity became a strategic goal. Acknowledging that an independent, advanced civilization like Tartaria had once existed there would have undermined the legitimacy of Russian annexation and assimilation efforts. It is no coincidence that following major Russian military campaigns, references to Tartaria were systematically removed. New maps issued by the Russian state eliminated the term Tartaria entirely, replacing it with Russian place names or more neutral geographic terms. Meanwhile, history textbooks reframed Grand Tartary as merely lands inhabited by savage tribes, stripping away any suggestion of a once flourishing civilization. This effort was not limited to Russia. In Europe, amid the rise of colonialism and the narrative of Western superiority, acknowledging a vast, sophisticated civilization deep within Asia was inconvenient. Western historians gradually shifted focus to subjects that fit more neatly within the Eurocentric historical model, leaving Tartaria to fade from academic discourse. By the mid-20th century, Tartaria was little more than a faint footnote in history books, if mentioned at all. An empire that had once appeared on world maps for centuries, with great cities, expansive trade networks, and complex governance, had vanished without a trace. Today, questions about Tartaria persist. Independent research communities, unorthodox archaeologists, and thousands of amateur scholars worldwide continue to search for clues. Each discovery, a strange architectural structure in Siberia, an uncatalogued ancient map, a forgotten line in an old manuscript, may add one more piece to the puzzle of Tartaria. And when we look back at the erasure of this name from official history, perhaps the most important question is not whether Tartaria truly existed, but why certain forces worked so hard to erase the memory of a civilization that may once have been great. If Tartaria showed us an empire that left its traces on maps only to be erased from history, then Scythia is one of the least understood civilizations of the ancient world, a familiar name to historians, yet what truly lies behind it remains shrouded in thick layers of mystery. In ancient records, the Scythians are often portrayed as fearsome nomadic warriors sweeping across the Eurasian steppes. But few know that their civilization, rich in culture, art, and knowledge, once commanded deep respect from mighty empires like Persia and Greece. Unlike many forgotten civilizations, much of the memory of Scythia has been distorted or deliberately reduced in official historical accounts. The earliest known sources on Scythia come from the Greek historian Herodotus, who traveled through Scythian lands in the 5th century BCE. In his histories, Herodotus describes a fierce, horse-riding people who lived freely on the vast steppes without permanent fortresses, yet possessed an extraordinary mastery of gold craftsmanship. He wrote of cavalry unmatched in battle, able to fight for days on horseback. Yet woven through his military accounts, Herodotus also recorded surprising details about the Scythians' spiritual life, their elaborate rituals, finely crafted religious artifacts, and mysterious connections with northern gods. What puzzles modern archaeologists and historians is the wealth of art and knowledge the Scythians left behind, a legacy at odds with the simplistic image of barbarian horsemen promoted in Roman and medieval accounts. Since the 18th century, when the first Scythian burial mounds were excavated in the Altai region, archaeologists have been astonished by intricate gold treasures, blending animal motifs, mythological figures, and metallurgical techniques of extraordinary sophistication. Among the most striking discoveries are the Pazyryk burial mounds, which preserved exquisitely carved wooden chariots, the world's oldest surviving woven carpets, and human remains bearing complex tattoos of animal symbols imbued with spiritual significance. Detailed analysis of these tattoos reveals a rich symbolic system connected to cosmology and deeply rooted spiritual beliefs. Yet the greater mystery lies in the disappearance of the Scythians from history. After dominating the Eurasian steppes from the 8th to the 3rd century BCE, Scythia seems to vanish from official historical records. Successor groups, such as the Sarmatians and the Huns, are described as new waves of migration, while any cultural links to the ancient Scythians are blurred or denied. Independent researchers argue that many cultural elements, from decorative arts and horse-riding techniques to funeral rites, of later steppe peoples bear the strong imprint of Scythian traditions. A bold hypothesis suggests that rather than disappearing, the Scythians gradually assimilated into other cultures, preserving their knowledge and artistry within hidden layers of cultural transmission. Adding to this, many medieval maps still marked Scythia as a region north of the Black Sea and across Central Asia, indicating that in the minds of European geographers, the name had never fully disappeared. It was only with the rise of modern nationalism and the redefinition of European ethnic identities that the term Scythia was gradually erased from official maps, replaced by new labels more aligned with modern nation-states. Another sensitive reason why Scythia is often downplayed in modern education lies in its connections to European secret societies. In manuscripts of the Rosicrucians and other esoteric groups of the 17th and 18th centuries, the Scythians were described as descendants of an ancient northern line of knowledge, believed to hold secrets about the cosmos, natural energies, and ancient medicine. These writings, once banned by the Catholic Church, further contributed to the suppression of Scythia's deeper historical image. Today, with the flourishing of steppe archaeology, new discoveries in Kazakhstan, the Altai Mountains, and regions around the Black Sea continue to reveal a Scythia far more sophisticated and vibrant than the narrative imposed by earlier powers. Yet these revelations also fuel intense debates about Scythia's true place in human history. The story of Scythia reminds us that the existence of a civilization is not always reflected honestly in the pages of official history. Sometimes what remains are hidden currents, in finely worked gold, in ancient tattoos, or in legends once dismissed as mere tales of nomads. And at times it is precisely this deliberate forgetting that most clearly reflects the conspiracies and power plays that shape the official records of humanity. Along the ancient Silk Road, a vast trade network that connected East and West for thousands of years, there was once a name that resonated as a symbol of knowledge, art, openness, and prosperity. That name was Sogdiana. Yet curiously, today it has all but vanished from the official flow of history, surviving only in scattered specialized texts, rarely encountered by the general public. This raises an important question. Why has a civilization that once stood at the heart of the greatest exchange network of the ancient world, helping to spread ideas and technologies on a global scale, been pushed into obscurity? And what in Sogdiana's history made certain powers so determined to blur or erase the memory of this land? Sogdiana, also known as Sugd or Sogdia, was a region between the Zeravshan and Kashkadaria river basins in what is now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. At its height, from the 6th century BCE to the 10th century CE, Sogdiana was one of the most important centers of trade, culture, and learning along the Silk Road, with flourishing cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Panjakent. Unlike many civilizations defined by conquest or strict national borders, Sogdiana was a culture of exchange, where merchants, scholars, artists, and believers of many faiths gathered. The Sogdians transported not only silk, spices, and gemstones, but also ideas, books, technologies, and knowledge from every corner of the ancient world. Remarkably, for centuries, the Sogdians served as the silent couriers of knowledge. They copied and transmitted mathematical and astronomical texts from India, medical works from Persia, Buddhist scriptures from China, and mystical writings from Jewish and Eastern Christian communities. Many manuscripts that eventually reached Europe via the Arab world had passed through Sogdian hands at some point in their journey. For this reason, Sogdiana was not just a trading hub, it was a crossroads for forbidden knowledge. In secluded monasteries and Sogdian merchant guilds, books banned in both East and West were secretly copied and preserved. Many modern scholars believe that without these Sogdian channels, much ancient knowledge would never have escaped the rigid censorship of empires. But this role also made Sogdiana a threat in the eyes of political and religious powers. As empires expanded, they sought to control not just territory, but also the flow of information and knowledge. An independent merchant community, unbound by rigid dogmas and serving as a conduit for dangerous ideas, was something those powers could not tolerate. This explains why, from the 10th century onward, as Orthodox Islamic dynasties consolidated power in Central Asia, Sogdian cities were systematically attacked and suppressed. Private libraries were burned, manuscripts seized, scholars executed or forced into exile. scattered Sogdian communities survived in remote oases. But the brilliance of a civilization that had once illuminated the Silk Road began to fade. At the same time, in the official histories of these new dynasties, the name Sogdiana was gradually erased. Islamic chronicles of the 11th and 12th centuries barely mentioned Sogdiana as a center of knowledge. In the West, as Arabic translations flowed into medieval Europe, the role of the Sogdians in transmitting knowledge was deliberately downplayed in favor of highlighting Islamic centers like Baghdad. Thus, well into the 20th century, the name Sogdiana appeared only in archaeological studies or in the writings of a few dedicated Orientalists. A civilization that had played a vital role in maintaining the intercontinental flow of knowledge was pushed into the shadows of history. Today, with new archaeological discoveries at Panjakent, Samarkand, and Bukhara, we are beginning to better understand the cultural and intellectual depth of the Sogdians. Wall paintings depict scenes of merchants from diverse cultures. Inscriptions reveal a remarkable capacity to absorb and transform varied ideologies, and the burned remains of ancient libraries still testify to a golden age that was deliberately obscured. Sogdiana teaches us a profound lesson. In history, it is not always those with the largest territories or strongest armies who leave the deepest mark. Sometimes it is the silent couriers, small communities driven by freedom of thought and a passion for knowledge, who truly shape the flow of human civilization. And perhaps it was precisely this quiet yet far-reaching influence that made certain powers so determined to erase Sogdiana's name from our collective memory. If Sogdiana was once a crossroads of knowledge, then Ophir, the mythical kingdom described in biblical texts, stood as a symbol of unimaginable wealth, a name filled with allure where King Solomon's fabled fleets once sailed across distant seas, returning laden with gold, ivory, and rare treasures. Yet paradoxically, to this day, Ophir remains one of the most mysterious civilizations, or destinations, ever mentioned in religious and historical records. The question, where exactly was Ophir and did it truly exist, has puzzled scholars for centuries, sparking efforts to obscure and downplay its story. Ophir first appears in the Old Testament, specifically in the books of Kings and Chronicles. According to these accounts, King Solomon, renowned for his wisdom and unmatched wealth, sent fleets in alliance with King Hiram of Tyre to seek out Ophir. After 3 years at sea, these ships returned with a staggering haul of gold, 420 talents, over 15 metric tons, an amount capable of shaking the economy of any ancient kingdom. But Ophir was more than a source of gold. The Bible describes its fleets bringing back silver, rare woods, gemstones, ivory, apes, and exotic birds, suggesting that Ophir was a rich trading center connected to tropical regions far beyond Israel's borders. As early as the Middle Ages, the true location of Ophir became one of the most tantalizing mysteries for explorers and theologians alike. Countless theories emerged, pointing to the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, India, and even Southeast Asia. Marco Polo himself suspected that Ophir might lie in what is now Sumatra or Malacca, regions known for vibrant trade in precious woods and gold. Some 16th century European maps even marked an uncertain Ophir somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Yet what complicates the story of Ophir is the interference of political and religious forces. During the height of Catholic Church authority, precisely identifying Ophir was seen as dangerous. For if Ophir were proven to lie beyond the Christian world, it would challenge the Eurocentric cosmology the Church sought to maintain. Thus, in many medieval and Renaissance Bible translations, references to Ophir were shortened or left vague. Some Latin editions of the Bible even omitted the detailed lists of exotic goods, deliberately avoiding questions about ancient Israel's links to foreign, unacknowledged civilizations. During the Age of Exploration, Ophir again became both an excuse for and a source of controversy. The Portuguese, upon occupying East African ports, claimed to have found a new Ophir at Sofala, Mozambique, even building monuments to commemorate the supposed discovery. Yet later, historians revealed this to be mere propaganda, lacking any convincing archaeological evidence. Conversely, some 19th-century Orientalist scholars proposed that Ophir was in India, specifically Tamil Nadu, a region with ancient traditions of gold mining, ivory trade, and luxury goods matching biblical descriptions. In fact, the word Ophir may derive from the Tamil Oviyar, meaning artisans and traders of precious objects. Intriguingly, ancient Arab merchant records describe voyages to gold-rich lands in the east, journeys lasting up to 3 years, mirroring the length of King Solomon's expeditions. Some chronicles suggest that Arab traders once transported gold and exotic goods from Southeast Asia to the Middle East via long Indian Ocean trade routes. So why does the story of Ophir remain so obscured? One key reason is that colonial powers and modern political forces have shown little interest in acknowledging that Eastern civilizations were deeply linked to the ancient Near East. Admitting that ancient Israel's economy may have depended on seaborne trade networks controlled by Eastern merchants would unsettle many Western historical narratives. Moreover, in the 20th century, when archaeological surveys in East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia uncovered sites tied to ancient gold trade, publication of these findings was often restricted to avoid reigniting sensitive religious and political debates. Today, while no one can say with certainty where Ophir was, one truth is clear. Ophir was more than a place. It was a symbol of global connectivity in ancient times, a thread in the vast fabric of trade, culture, and knowledge deliberately obscured for reasons both religious and political. And each time an ancient map is unrolled or an Eastern artifact surfaces in a Middle Eastern tomb, the question of Ophir echoes once more, reminding us that history is full of untold pathways still waiting to be explored. In South America, where the towering Andes embrace lush green valleys and where the Amazon rainforest conceals almost every trace of prehistory, countless stories remain untold. Among them, one of the greatest, though rarely mentioned, continues to intrigue archaeologists and independent researchers alike, the story of Zana Valley, a legendary valley where local legends speak of a once prosperous empire, one that possessed knowledge and technology far beyond the rest of the continent in its time. Yet almost every trace of it has been buried by time and by powerful forces that did not want history rewritten. Zana Valley, according to scattered accounts and indigenous lore, lies deep within the northern Peruvian jungle near the modern border with Ecuador. As early as the 16th century, when Spanish expeditions ventured into these lands in search of Inca gold, vague reports surfaced of an isolated valley, home to strange stone structures and a wealthy people living apart from known civilizations. Conquistador Pedro de Tiesa de Leon once recorded in his journals hearing tales of a valley of stone walls and a river of gold, but lacked the time to investigate. Jesuit missionary records from their work in South America also referenced rumors of Zana Valley. A report sent to the Vatican in 1609, now housed in the church's secret archives, described local accounts of a small but wealthy kingdom known for goldworking and crafting unusual alloys. Yet within a few decades, mentions of Zana Valley vanished from such reports, as though an unspoken directive had halted all further exploration in that direction. The Chachapoya people, known as warriors of the clouds, who once inhabited this region, preserved legends of an ancient kingdom deep within a hidden valley where rulers built vast stone structures. Strikingly, the construction techniques described in these tales resemble technologies that remain unexplained even today, echoing the mysteries of Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu. The 20th century marked a turning point. In 1965, Peruvian archaeologist Federico Kaufmann Doig led an expedition to the Zana Valley, uncovering massive stone ruins, towering walls, built from multi-ton blocks with no trace of metal tools. They also found underground corridors, strange altars, and fragments of alloyed objects containing platinum, a metal supposedly beyond the capabilities of ancient metallurgy to refine in pure form. Yet what made the story even more mysterious was the response from authorities. Soon after these initial discoveries, excavations in Zana Valley were abruptly halted. The Peruvian government, citing environmental and cultural preservation, imposed a strict ban on all unauthorized archaeological activity in the region. Independent researchers seeking access were either denied permits or entangled in complex bureaucratic barriers. Leaked internal reports from the Peruvian Institute of Archaeology revealed that some findings in Zana Valley might challenge current theories regarding the development of pre-Inca civilizations. Radiocarbon dating of wooden materials from subterranean structures yielded ages of over 3,000 years, suggesting these constructions predated the Inca by millennia. Furthermore, in Jesuit archives in Lima, old manuscripts mention missionaries in the 17th century discovering inscriptions in Zana, written in a symbolic system not yet deciphered, unlike the well-known Inca Quipu. Some scholars suspect this may represent a lost written language. What then really happened to the empire of Zana Valley? Could it have been an independent center of knowledge and commerce, flourishing alongside known civilizations? And if so, why were its traces so deliberately obscured? One hypothesis suggests that Zana Valley once lay on an ancient trade route linking the Amazon with the Pacific coast. Its wealth and advanced metalworking may have posed a threat to both the Spanish conquerors and to Inca rulers seeking absolute control over the Andes. Systematic efforts to suppress or destroy evidence of this civilization may have begun during the colonial period and continued well into the 20th century. Today, Zana Valley remains one of South America's least explored archaeological regions. Modern expeditions face rugged terrain, strict conservation laws, and formidable bureaucratic hurdles. Yet within independent research circles, Zana Valley has become a symbol, a reminder that stories lost in the deep forest may still hold secrets capable of reshaping our understanding of human history. And as the Amazon rainforest steadily recedes, each ruin, each fragment unearthed in Zana Valley becomes ever more precious, like a final whisper from a civilization the world tried so hard to forget. Perhaps nowhere on Earth holds as many secrets as the Amazon rainforest, a vast expanse of more than 5.5 million square kilometers, over 80% of which remains largely unexplored. For centuries, the Amazon was viewed as a blank space on the world's archaeological map, a wild land believed to harbor only scattered tribes, with no advanced civilization ever having developed there. But was this emptiness real, or the result of a history deliberately obscured? Among the Amazon's deepest mysteries, one story stands out: the legend of the lost city of Z. Throughout the 20th century, explorers risked their lives, in and sometimes paid the ultimate price in search of this fabled civilization. Yet behind the dream of Z lies a deeper question. Could the Amazon once have been home to one or more complex prehistoric civilizations, contradicting the narrative long taught by mainstream history? The legend of Z is closely linked to British explorer Colonel Percy Fawcett. In the early 20th century, Fawcett, an experienced surveyor with a keen eye for ancient maps and secret documents, stumbled upon an old manuscript in Rio de Janeiro's Royal Library, Manuscript 512. This manuscript, attributed to an 18th century Portuguese explorer, described a stone city deep within the rainforest, with inscribed columns, colossal statues, and vast buildings. The details were too precise to dismiss as fantasy. Fawcett believed the manuscript preserved the memory of a lost civilization, which he named the Lost City of Z. But Fawcett was not the first to suggest that large civilizations once thrived in the Amazon. In accounts from 16th century Spanish expeditions, Francisco de Orellana, the first European to navigate the Amazon River, described encountering great cities, large populations, sophisticated agriculture, and powerful armies. Yet when later expeditions returned, these cities seemed to have vanished. The official explanation has long been that these communities collapsed due to European-born diseases. Yet that theory does not account for reports of stone architecture or advanced agricultural systems. A bolder, and rarely discussed, hypothesis suggests that colonial authorities deliberately erased evidence of complex native civilizations to justify portraying the Amazon as an empty wilderness, ripe for exploitation. For decades, mainstream scholars dismissed the idea of advanced Amazonian civilizations, citing the belief that rainforest soils were too poor to sustain large agricultural societies. But recent discoveries have completely transformed that view. Since the 2000s, with the advent of LiDAR, light detection and ranging technology, archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of massive geometric structures, ditches, earthen walls, and circular or square foundations hundreds of meters across, hidden beneath the forest canopy. These structures, thousands of years old, clearly required sophisticated social organization. Additionally, the discovery of terra preta, artificial nutrient-rich black soil, proves that prehistoric Amazonians developed sustainable large-scale agriculture, transforming rainforest soil to support thriving communities. These regions show evidence of large agricultural settlements, a stark contrast to the long-held image of scattered hunter-gatherer bands. So what was Fawcett's City of Z? Many modern researchers believe it may have been a composite memory, one of multiple great cities that once dotted the Amazon. Some LiDAR maps have revealed networks of interconnected settlements, raised causeways linking communities, in a manner strikingly similar to ancient urban complexes. Yet strangely, despite growing evidence, large-scale excavations in the Amazon remain limited, hindered by difficult terrain, political obstacles, and economic interests. Acknowledging that the Amazon once hosted major civilizations could spark indigenous claims to cultural and territorial rights, a reality some governments and corporations prefer to avoid. Moreover, certain voices in mainstream archaeology still cling to conservative views, reluctant to admit that South America's history may be far more complex than textbooks have long portrayed. Meanwhile, indigenous legends persist. Many Amazonian tribes tell of ancestral cities, sacred places hidden deep within the forest, where outsiders are not permitted to tread. Some even say that guardians still protect these ancient cities, living in secrecy beyond the reach of the modern world. Today, as modern technology allows us to peer beneath the forest's green veil, we may be only beginning to grasp the scale and sophistication of the civilizations that once flourished in the Amazon. The lost city of Z may not be a single metropolis, but a symbol of an entire lost chapter of history, one that, when fully revealed, could force us to rewrite our understanding of South America's past. If there is one symbol that continues to astonish the modern world while baffling archaeologists and historians for centuries, it is surely the pyramids of Egypt. Massive stone blocks stacked with perfect precision, secret chambers and corridors aligned with accuracy, measured in thousandths of a millimeter, all standing as a timeless challenge from the past. Who built them? And how? The official answer: that the pyramids, particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza, were constructed by the pharaohs of Egypt's fourth dynasty, has been taught in textbooks for generations. Yet as deeper studies emerge, an increasing number of questions remain unresolved within this framework. First, there is the issue of dating. While mainstream scholars place the construction of the Great Pyramid around 2560 BCE, during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, Cheops, geological and archaeological analyses suggest otherwise. Weathering patterns on the pyramid surface appear to result from prolonged rainfall, a climatic phenomenon that has not occurred in Egypt since the Sahara underwent intense desertification more than 10,000 years ago. Boston University geologist Robert Schoch shocked the academic world by analyzing erosion on the Sphinx and nearby stones at Giza, concluding they had been worn by rainwater rather than mere wind and sand. If true, this would imply that at least the foundations, or original structures, of these monuments predate Egypt's known dynasties, reaching back to a prehistoric era. Further complicating the story are the archaeological facts themselves. The blocks used to build the Great Pyramid average between 2.5 and 15 tons, with some interior stones weighing over 70 tons. Transporting, cutting, and assembling them with perfect precision and using Bronze Age tools remains an unsolved puzzle. Excavated tools found near the site do not match the level of technology required to cut and polish such hard granite. Moreover, direct inscriptions from Pharaoh Khufu's time make almost no mention of pyramid construction, highly unusual for a culture known for meticulously recording its grand projects to glorify its kings. Another curious element is the Great Pyramid's internal structure. The arrangement of corridors, hidden chambers, and air shafts aligned with specific star constellations, notably the Orion Belt, linked to the god Osiris, reflects an astonishing level of astronomical knowledge, far beyond what was needed for a simple royal tomb. Researchers like Robert Bauval have demonstrated that the pyramid's central axis and the placement of the neighboring pyramids align with Orion's belt, as it would have appeared in Egypt's skies around 10,500 BCE. Is this coincidence? Or evidence that the builders possessed deep astronomical knowledge and possibly planned their work in a time far older than mainstream history accepts? There is also a subtler, more controversial aspect: the connection to pre-pharaonic civilizations. Many ancient Egyptian legends speak of the Zep-Tepi, the first time, an era when gods or visitors from afar taught humanity the arts of building, astronomy, and profound knowledge. While mainstream historians dismiss this as myth, ancient records, such as the Palermo stone and inscriptions at the Temple of Edfu, mention dynasties before the pharaohs, with rulers reigning thousands of years before Egypt's first dynasty, raising difficult questions. Some independent scholars suggest that a prehistoric civilization may once have flourished along the Nile, achieving high levels of technical knowledge before collapsing due to climate catastrophe or geological upheaval. The Giza pyramids and the Sphinx may be their legacy, later adapted or reused by the ancient Egyptians. Notably, during the 19th and early 20th centuries, many studies proposing the existence of a pre-pharaonic civilization faced fierce opposition from mainstream academics and religious authorities. Acknowledging a highly advanced civilization existing before the biblical timeline threatened the religious and cosmological beliefs of the era. Consequently, inconvenient archaeological evidence was sometimes overlooked, and alternative theories were often excluded from official academic publications. Even today, scholars who propose non-mainstream theories about the pyramids' true origins face skepticism and resistance from conservative archaeological circles, yet the stone walls remain. The massive blocks still stand defying time, bearing the silent marks of a past we may not yet fully understand. And perhaps the question, who truly built these great pyramids, will continue to stir curiosity and challenge the boundaries of accepted history for generations to come. If the Egyptian pyramids make us question the technical mastery of ancient civilizations, then the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, a massive stone complex buried for tens of thousands of years beneath the soil of Turkey, has shaken the very foundations of traditional human history. For Göbekli Tepe, dated to over 12,000 years old, comes from an era when, according to mainstream history, humans were still scattered in small bands of hunter-gatherers, unfamiliar with agriculture, and far from building complex societies, let alone sophisticated architecture. Who then built this site, and why was it buried and forgotten for millennia? The story began in 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and his team stumbled upon massive T-shaped stone pillars at a mound called Göbekli Tepe near Şanlıurfa, Turkey. Initially classified as a Neolithic burial site, the truth soon stunned the archaeological world. Towering stone pillars, up to 6 meters tall, weighing between 10 and 20 tons, stood arranged in complete concentric circles. Carved into their surfaces were remarkably detailed images: lions, snakes, birds, foxes, wild cattle, and other symbolic figures. Researchers quickly realized this was no burial site, but an intricate ceremonial complex, perhaps the oldest temple yet known to humanity. Even more astonishing was its dating. Radiocarbon analysis showed that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9,600 BCE, during a period when, according to established history, civilization was not supposed to exist. This discovery overturned the entire theory of human societal evolution. If history books are correct, only after humans settled down, domesticated plants and animals, and developed agriculture, could they construct such elaborate monuments. Yet, Göbekli Tepe proves otherwise. Hunter-gatherer communities, or at least societies on the cusp of civilization, could organize labor forces, transport massive stones, and design architectural and symbolic complexes of extraordinary sophistication. Who could have achieved this? This question continues to divide the academic world. Some mainstream scholars reluctantly accept that hunter-gatherer societies may have been more complex than previously thought. But many independent researchers raise deeper questions. How could supposedly unsophisticated groups, lacking construction techniques and mechanical tools, move and assemble multi-ton stones with such precision? Moreover, the symbols and carvings at Göbekli Tepe seem to reflect a complex cosmology with advanced astronomical symbolism. Some researchers argue that the stone pillars were arranged to mark celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and specific positions of star constellations. Astronomer Martin B. Sweatman and colleagues have analyzed these symbols and proposed that they record a massive comet impact around 10,900 years ago, coinciding with the onset of the Younger Dryas Ice Age. If true, the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not just craftsmen, but astronomers with profound cosmic knowledge. Another mystery is why this entire complex was deliberately buried. Archaeologists found that Göbekli Tepe's circles had been carefully filled in with earth and debris, an intentional act, not a result of natural erosion. Such deliberate burial required a massive collective effort, prompting even more questions. Was this due to a cultural upheaval, a natural disaster, or a profound religious shift that compelled the builders to bury the site's memory? Or, as some theorists suggest, could the sudden transition from egalitarian hunter-gatherer societies to hierarchical agricultural ones have driven a deliberate erasure of older sacred symbols? The deeper researchers dig, the clearer it becomes that Göbekli Tepe may not be unique. Ongoing LiDAR surveys and stratigraphic studies are revealing similar traces of other such sites across the Fertile Crescent, raising a staggering possibility. During an era when mainstream history claims humanity was barely emerging from caves, a network of ritual, architectural, and intellectual centers may have spanned this region. Yet despite mounting evidence, Göbekli Tepe remains largely overlooked or briefly mentioned in many national history textbooks. Perhaps because acknowledging its significance would require rewriting our entire understanding of civilization's progress. And perhaps, as some independent scholars suspect, Göbekli Tepe hints at ancient layers of knowledge that long predate the civilizations we know. If recovered and understood, such knowledge could transform how humanity views its own story, and that perhaps is something some forces would prefer to prevent. Among all the stories of distorted history, perhaps no region of the world has suffered such systematic erasure as Africa. For centuries, from the colonial era to the present day, the Western portrayal of Africa, and the version taught in many textbooks, has often been deliberately reduced to the image of a land without history, a vast expanse of primitive tribes locked in eternal chaos. Yet the truth, as we shall see, is far more complex and far more magnificent. Across this great continent once flourished vibrant civilizations, mighty trade empires, centers of learning, and awe-inspiring stone cities that for many reasons were deliberately erased from official history. Among them, two names stand out: Great Zimbabwe and the ancient Mali Empire. Let us begin with Zimbabwe, a name long shrouded in so-called mystery throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. When European explorers first arrived in the southern African highlands in the 19th century, they were astonished to discover the ruins of a massive stone complex, walls of unmortared stone rising 11 meters high, stretching hundreds of meters in length, mysterious conical towers, and intricately carved altars. The local people called this place Zimbabwe, House of Great Stone, from which the name Zimbabwe would later emerge. Yet instead of acknowledging that local African peoples had once possessed the knowledge and skill to build such marvels, European colonial powers, particularly during the British Empire, worked tirelessly to deny this fact. They put forth outlandish theories, attributing the structures to the ancient Phoenicians, the Arabs, even lost civilizations from the Mediterranean. The goal was clear: to admit that the Shona and other Bantu peoples had once achieved such high levels of architectural and social sophistication would undermine the very foundation of the colonial narrative, the so-called civilizing mission of the white man. For decades, colonial archaeologists were pressured to omit or distort evidence linking Great Zimbabwe to its indigenous builders. Scholars such as Gertrude Caton Thompson, who dared to publicly assert that the ruins were indeed the work of ancient African peoples, faced harsh criticism and professional isolation. Today, modern archaeological analysis has definitively proven that Great Zimbabwe was built by Bantu-speaking communities between the 11th and 15th centuries. Yet an awkward silence still hangs over many Western textbooks. Centuries of deliberate denial have left a lasting legacy, a legacy of erasure. If the story of Zimbabwe was rewritten to serve colonial aims, then the story of ancient Mali reveals another dimension: the hidden global influence of an African empire. During the 13th and 14th centuries, while Europe languished in the depths of the Middle Ages, the Mali Empire stood as one of the wealthiest and most advanced nations in the world. Its capital, Timbuktu, was a great center of scholarship and commerce. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu attracted scholars from across the Islamic world, with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and law copied and studied there. While Europe still struggled under rigid religious orthodoxy, the scholars of Timbuktu were discussing precise planetary motions, advanced healing methods, and even cosmological theories that would later be rediscovered during the European Renaissance. But why do we rarely hear of this story? Partly because of the colonial legacy. When France conquered West Africa in the late 19th century, it worked to control and impoverish the intellectual heritage of Timbuktu. Many precious manuscripts were confiscated and transported to Paris or European libraries. Some were destroyed, an effort to erase the memory of African intellectual brilliance. Moreover, acknowledging that Africa once housed great centers of knowledge directly challenged the image that colonial empires sought to maintain, an Africa portrayed as backward in need of civilizing. Even today, in many mainstream history curricula across the West, ancient Mali and the legacy of Timbuktu are scarcely mentioned, if at all. Yet the ancient manuscripts remain. Hundreds of thousands of scrolls are still preserved by local communities, quietly, patiently, awaiting the day when their true story may again be heard. And increasingly, researchers are returning to study and restore this hidden treasury of knowledge. The stories of Zimbabwe and ancient Mali teach us this: that history is not only about what happened, but about what is chosen to be remembered and what is chosen to be forgotten. And in Africa, perhaps many such forgotten chapters still await to be written, more fairly and more truthfully. When we speak of pre-Columbian civilizations in the Americas, most people think of the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca, names that have entered both textbooks and the public imagination. Yet few know that before all three of these civilizations, there existed a mysterious culture, considered the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. This was the Olmec civilization. And at its very heart lies a mystery that remains unsolved to this day: the colossal stone heads, whose faces do not resemble any known indigenous peoples of the Americas. These stone heads, towering up to 3 meters high, weighing anywhere from 6 to 50 tons, have been discovered at sites such as La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes, in what is now the Mexican states of Veracruz and Tabasco. Since their discovery in the early 20th century, they have puzzled archaeologists, not merely for their immense size or exquisite craftsmanship, but for the striking features they portray. The Olmec heads display characteristics that many scholars cannot ignore: broad noses, full lips, high cheekbones, features uncommon among known Native American populations. From the moment the first heads were unearthed, some researchers began to ask a bold question. Could these colossal heads be evidence of an ancient African presence in the Americas? That question has become the center of intense academic debate, and a politically charged one at that. Independent researchers such as Ivan van Sertima in his book They Came Before Columbus have argued that it is possible there were transoceanic contacts between Africa and the Americas thousands of years before Columbus. Van Sertima and his supporters point out that the features of the Olmec heads bear a strong resemblance to West African groups, particularly the Mando peoples. In addition, they cite certain symbolic similarities, metalworking techniques, and mythological motifs that may reflect echoes of ancient contact. Some archaeological sites even yield artifacts that could hint at foreign origins, though these findings are often left unpublished due to their controversial nature. Of course, mainstream archaeology strongly rejects this hypothesis. In their view, the Olmec heads represent an indigenous artistic style, and the so-called African features are a matter of subjective interpretation. They argue that there is no definitive genetic or archaeological evidence proving an African presence in the Americas prior to European exploration. Yet what makes the story even more intriguing is how these debates have been carefully controlled. Throughout the 20th century, researchers who supported theories of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact faced significant barriers when attempting to publish their work in mainstream scientific journals. Many studies on ancient transoceanic exchange were either rejected outright or quietly excluded from major academic conferences. Some scholars suggest that this blanket denial is not purely academic but political. There is a strong desire to preserve a clean narrative of isolated development in which the Americas' indigenous civilizations are portrayed as having evolved entirely independently of outside influence. To acknowledge an early African presence, or that of any other external group, would require rewriting major portions of global history, a task fraught with political sensitivities and long-standing prejudices. Meanwhile, the Olmec culture itself presents other enigmas. The civilization appears to have emerged almost suddenly around 1500 BCE, with high levels of artistry, sophisticated construction techniques, and complex social organization, yet with few clear signs of a gradual internal evolution. Cities like La Venta reveal advanced urban planning, intricate ceremonial structures, and deeply layered belief systems. Moreover, many Olmec symbols bear